Hello my friends, Rob Roselli coming to you on Clean TV. Today being Tuesday, September 27th, 2016. And again, the website boxofsunglasses.com, Twitter at Rob Roselli, email info at boxofsunglasses.com. And again, that website is boxofsunglasses.com. And over the past several weeks, we have discussed several of my books. Okay, well, just go through the books, okay, because tonight's show, what we're going to do is discuss Revelation 17 and 18 in the United States as the one and only candidate for the Mystery Babylon mentioned in Revelation 17 and 18. I know there's many so-called Bible scholars, biblical scholars out there who have all kinds of ideas for Mystery Babylon, and a lot of times they're the same fools that look at Israel as God's chosen people, which we'll get into in a couple minutes. But this is the first book, okay? They Live, Great Society of the Undead. All right, and it's available on the last page of the site. If you page through to the table of contents, and you're on the honor system, as far as this one goes, it's available as a PDF download. Okay, but anyway, it's packed with a lot of information. And you can see already the trouble's starting already, just from the front cover of the book. Okay, we have here the capless pyramid of Giza, of Egypt. Okay, and if you go back to, of course, Exodus and the book of Exodus and the plagues against Egypt, the 10 plagues, which, by the way, are symbolic of just about every god of ancient Egypt, are the 10 plagues. And that could be a show in and of itself, and perhaps we'll make that a future YouTube broadcast. But anyway, so you can see the trouble starting already right here in New York City. Is St. John's the Divine Cathedral, financed by J.P. Morgan, who, along with Rockefeller and Rothschild and the other Satan worshiping Illuminati criminals that run the world and have run the world really since the beginning of the time, but for our purposes right now, the last 100 years since the establishment of this system, the Federal Reserve System, with the all-seeing illuminated eye of Osiris, Apollo, or Nimrod, which can be equated with Hades, the Greek god Hades, Hades was a Greek term for the abyss or hell, and was also a god of the underworld, which also equates to Osiris, which is going to become very interesting here in a couple of minutes in our discussion on Revelation and the horned god, okay, and the god Pan, which equates to the goat of Mendes, which equates to Baphomet. And Pan, of course, is where we get our word pandemonium, all right, and he was the god of wine and revelry, sexual immorality, was the Greek god Pan. Okay, so we can see he's kind of related to this thing right here in chaos. He's also the pandemonium being chaos. And of course, the New World Order, Satan worshipping maniacs that run this world, are about to institute their version of chaos to eliminate 90% of the world's population per the Georgia Guidestones. And you can hear or read about the Georgia Guidestones on my site or on my former YouTube videos, and I'll get those YouTubes. I'm working on that, getting those labeled and summarized so you can hear all about the Georgia Guidestones. And we'll get to that in a little bit on the discussion on my second book. But I'm just trying to laying the groundwork or the foundation for the case, the airtight case that the Mystery Babylon of Revelation, again, is the United States of America. And anybody at this point, and I really don't care, anybody that tells you otherwise is pretty much an imbecile, all right? And I'll just come right out and say it. Nothing else makes sense when you realize what this country, which again, and I'll say this again and again, is not my country, this corporation, this Federal Reserve-run corporation, with its satanic, all-seeing, illuminated eye above its capless pyramid on the back of its Federal Reserve note. So when I say the Federal Reserve Corporation, called the United States, and its mercenary army runs around the world getting this country involved in all kinds of conflicts it has no business being in, and pushing in this psychopathic push for World War III over countries that we've actually made worse, Syria, the Ukraine, Libya, etc., by sticking our noses in and as well as pushing the envelope on war with Russia makes no sense, except in the context of these psychopaths, this half-man image of the beast, this half-white scam artist known as Obama, and we discussed that multi-name scam on the last show. Okay, that image of the beast in the White House, Pharaoh Barry, we'll call him, and his high priest Egyptian overlords and their psychopathic drive for World War III can only be explained in the context of order out of chaos. Okay, there's no other rational explanation for it. Okay, you can sit here and you can have all kinds of geopolitical, non-religious arguments, but at some point, the logic, you come to the end of logic, okay, and human, just basic human compassion and human decency and basic morality, that all runs out, and these problems are still there, okay. But again, it all emanates from the Federal Reserve Corporation and its mercenary military that's running around the earth, okay, starting wars everywhere, starting trouble, instigating this ISIS, this scam, this Islamic, this 7th century barbarians somehow conglomerated into an army that's taking on all these nations, okay, this same group of 19 half-wit box cutter armed losers that managed to evade the most powerful and most pervasive intelligence network in the world and simultaneously get on 4 airliners and 4 different airports, or 3 different airports, okay, and do what they did on 9/11. We're supposed to believe this narrative, okay, with these useful idiots, these dupes. And I'm not defending radical Islam at all. I'm just saying there's no way they should be able to get away with everything they're getting away with. So they're dupes, they're setup artists, okay. They give the military-industrial complex, what I call the military-industrial, or the un-American genocidal complex, a reason for being, and I get into that whole thing. But anyway, so the point is that the evil, the pervasiveness, the evil that emanates from this country is unparalleled. Okay, again, that's the capless pyramid of Giza. Okay, and keep this in mind right here in New York City. Okay, when we talk about the whore that sits on many waters, as we will in a discussion on Revelation 17. Okay, and it's actually a breakdown of Revelation 17 and 18, but I figure 1 hour is probably about a good time to go through this, okay, and that about enough get us to Revelation 17. But okay, this is the second book, the Un-American Genocidal Complex, okay, and we discussed this on also several shows back on the Georgia Guidestones, okay, with their human sacrifice, anti-Ten Commandments, which we went through, which are in this book, okay, available on boxofsunglasses.com. And of course we have Skull and Bones here, the American Illuminati, okay, illumination, all-seeing eye above the capless pyramid, okay, the stone, the capstone, the stone that the builders rejected, okay, you know, Jesus, okay, in Matthew 21 describes himself as the stone that the builders rejected. Well, if the builders rejected a stone, that means they accepted another stone. So what stone did they accept? Right here, the all-seeing eye, the illuminated eye, Genesis chapter 3. Yea, your eye shall be opened. The illuminated eye of Osiris, Apollo, Nimrod, Pan, Baphomet, Lucifer, Satan. Okay, you're starting to see the pattern here. Okay, and then, of course, the political, the physical nexus of this all right here, the United Nations building. Okay, and you have to excuse me for 1 minute. I have one piece of information I wanted to present. Speaking of the Un-American Genocidal Complex, okay, and again, you know, that goes into the whole American eugenics movement, social Darwinism, the idiocy of Darwinism. What Darwinism really is, survival of the fittest. It gave an excuse for the Anglo-American eugenics people, the Ivy League elitists, the white, progressive, uber elitists, okay, which are still in existence today, give them an excuse to kind of condescend and rate who should live and who should die. Okay, in a lot of instances, what this resulted in was black people ending up in zoos and carnivals around the country as proof of evolution. So this kind of institutional racism, which really did exist courtesy of our Darwin social survival of the fittest types that populated the universities and politics in this nation in the 1800s, manifested itself in the American Eugenics Society, okay, which gave rise to the Nazis. Okay, Adolf Hitler got a lot of his ideas from American and British eugenicists who got their ideas again from survival of the fittest, social Darwinism, and that whole scam. And that's covered in the Un-American Genocidal Complex. And of course, one of the most prevalent people to rise out of this sea of evil, okay, was Margaret Sanger. Okay, now Margaret Sanger, again, and I'll say this again, her big thing was, you know, she was so cold and such a wench, such an evil, demonic person, okay. Her big thing was, why are we trying to sterilize and institutionalize and stick these people in sanitariums when we should probably just kill them right in the womb, okay? And this gave rise to what was called the American Birth Control League. And in particular, she had a particular disdain for black people, okay? And this is Margaret Sanger, all right? And of course, you know, her and Adolf Hitler became friends. You know, they corresponded. Their underlings corresponded with each other. They had kind of an intercontinental love fest going, as did the American Eugenics Society in general. And I don't want to rehash, you know, that again. Again, that's covered in the Un-American Genocidal Complex. But the point is that Margaret Sanger's organization had to change its name to Planned Parenthood because it became fairly unpopular in the early 1940s to be associated with Adolf Hitler for obvious reasons, okay? So when Hillary Clinton, who I consider Queen, on a par with Queen Jezebel back there in First Kings, or maybe even worse than Queen Jezebel, okay, when she accepts the Margaret Sanger Award, this is what she's accepting, okay? So all these imbeciles, just as an aside, all these imbeciles protesting and this and that around the country right now, who never had a blanking thing to say about Margaret Sanger and the abortion industry in this country, are all full of crap, okay? All right, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to go down that road right now and get off track, but speaking of the presidential debates, I got this in the mail. Okay, this is the emergency appeal for the Legal Defense Fund, the Life Legal Defense Foundation. I have no affiliation with these people. I'll donate to them, but basically they're associated with the Center for Medical Progress, and these are the people that expose Planned Parenthood, or the American Birth Control League, or Margaret Sanger's Negro Project, for the evil organization of the ruthless barbarians that they are, okay? And of course that became news, and it kind of faded from the news. But now, do you want to talk about presidential debates? Now, was this ever going to come up? Probably not. All right. Now, remember, the idiots on Fox News, okay, the so-called conservatives, those fake conservatives, those warmongering maniacs, those supporters of the Federal Reserve Corporation and its mercenary army going around the world in countries that it has no business being in, okay, all right, if somebody leaves a baby in a car in a parking lot somewhere, okay, they were all over it, you know, it's the, you know, the baby, and I'm not saying that's right, okay, and I'm not trying to belittle those events, okay, but you see it's on national news, you know, so-and-so left a baby in a car and went into the store, and someone found it, and, you know, and it's all, and the mimbos and the bimbos and the newscasters, everybody's so upset. How about this in this newsletter, just to, again, this is laying the groundwork for why there's no doubt that this nation is the Mystery Babylon of Revelation, okay? It's not Arab countries because they're attacking God's chosen people, these imbeciles, another group of imbeciles, these Israel-supporting so-called Christians, on these so-called Christian networks, asking you to send $1,000 to support Israel. All right, and I'm not being anti-Semitic, but we'll get into that in a second. But anyway, usually you can see the whole brain come out. Okay, and this is actual dialogue from Planned Parenthood technicians, parentheses, Negro Project technicians, describing procedures for harvesting intact body parts from aborted babies. Okay, the heart was still beating. A 20-week-old baby boy. His tiny body was laid out on a stainless steel tray. His legs twitched. A Planned Parenthood lab technician stood over him with razor-sharp surgical scissors. Next to her was the customer, a buyer from a tissue procurement agency. Their assignment: remove the baby's brain and brainstem intact. The price had already been negotiated, $160 for a live baby's brains. But there were conditions. The buyer would only accept an intact, undamaged brain. Otherwise, the deal was off. The lab tech poked the baby's chest. The heart was beating. The buyer grinned and gave a nod of approval. The lab tech went to work. First, we make a small incision under the chin. She described, this is where you insert the scissors and beginning cutting through the face. That opens the skull from the front. If done correctly, usually you can see the whole brain come out. And I think I've made the point, okay, but that's a level of barbarity on a par with Hitler's concentration camps, okay? You're cutting a baby's face off to remove its brain for $160, okay? And this goes on tens of thousands of times a week, okay? Say, so it's 50 million. It's averaging about 1 million a year, okay? Abortions in this country, okay? Where this kind of thing goes on. So where is the humanity, okay? And Obama, this image of the beast, this half-white scam artist, this multi-name, multi-birthplace scam, has put people that oppose abortion as potential domestic extremists, and of course the Nancy Pelosi's and the modern-day Queen Jezebel, Margaret Sanger, Hillary Clinton, her crowd came out and they're with vitriol against these people for exposing this kind of behavior. But the fact of the matter is that that'll never come up in a presidential debate. Okay, so if you think Trump, because he's going to fight radical Islam or make America great again or whatever nonsense he's spewing, okay, if that does not get addressed, and I'm guessing it's not, that kind of thing, we're in deep doo-doo in this nation, okay, from a biblical standpoint. This is why I consider this whole debate, this whole thing, the emails, the whole thing, the Hillary, the felon walking Hillary, Queen Jezebel against Trump. All right, and Trump is maybe 2 steps back of 100 steps that this country needs to go back to get back on track of where it was. Trump's not nearly enough, okay? And all right, he's shaking up the establishment and all this thing, and they all hate him. And if he does win, which he probably won't, all the illegal aliens voting and all this other nonsense, voting machines controlled by George Soros or whatever. If he does win, they'll probably just assassinate him anyway, or something is going to happen, okay? Because there's no way that our Satan-worshipping overlords are going to cede control to Trump and America, okay? But I don't want to go off on this tangent, okay? The fact of the matter is, what I just read to you is one example of a live baby literally having its face ripped off and its brain sold for $160, okay? And that's happened, how many tens of millions of times in this nation. So you're going to sit there and tell me, because of God's chosen people, which is a whole scam in and of itself, Israel, there's something worse, especially from a nation that did start out under Christian principles, okay? If you go and you read Hebrews chapter 6, and redemption and having redemption and having, once you have redemption, it being impossible to go back. So we have a nation who's loosely equivalent to Hebrews 6. Okay, we were a Christian nation at one time, to have fallen to the point where we sell a baby's brains for $160. There's no comparison. There's no parallel to that. Okay, and that doesn't even. And I'm not even covering. I'm just covering only a part of this, the un-American genocidal complex. Okay, the psychopaths who gave us Adolf Hitler. Okay, the psychopaths who control the world with this professional loan sharking operation called the Federal Reserve System. Okay, there's no parallel in world history. It just doesn't exist. Okay, so if you're going to sit there and say and try and make arguments, and I'm not saying this. Okay, nobody comes close. All right, to the United States as far as candidates for Mystery Babylon, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper here in a second. Now, if you go on again, and just let me review also, I have three basic principles that you have to keep in mind and follow this program, whatever it is you want to call it. Okay, and one is that the Bible is the infallible Word of God. There's no questions asked. There's no negotiating. No amount of scientists, experts, quote, evolutionary experts, physicists, or whoever this nonsense are. That's just it. Okay, there's no debating that. Okay, evolution is not science. Okay, no matter how many physicists and scientists get on there and say that is. Okay, that they have there's no physical laws that can establish the creation or the beginning of the universe. It's not the Big Bang. Okay, and I'll just say in a nutshell, okay, without going down the rabbit trail, that evolutionists, what they have done, the basis, the foundation of their science is the assumption that God doesn't exist. Okay, and they build this facade of evolutionary science on that assumption. So when you go down to the base of it, at the end of the day, okay, no matter how intelligent they sound or try to make themselves sound, evolution is 100% about religion. Okay, it's the religion of atheism, but it's religion nonetheless. Okay, so F equals ma, Newton's first law. Whether God exists or doesn't exist is irrelevant to that mathematical equation and scientific law. Okay, is my point. Okay, and you can't satisfy Newton's laws with the Big Bang. You have to make assumptions that some other laws of physics were in existence at the time of the creation of the universe, and that's based on faith. Well, what's that faith in what? The faith is that God doesn't exist. There is no God. Okay, it's not based on science. So, quite simply, no matter what facade, again, of physicists and whatever people they want to throw in front of it, evolution is 100% about religion. It's 100% religious. Okay, with a facade of scientific nonsense painted over it. But anyway, so that's number one. The Bible is God's word, no questions asked, take it or leave it. Number two is Israel is not God's chosen people. All right, I can't believe it. Just tonight, as I'm reading and going over a few things for this presentation, I got the Daystar Network on, and I'm listening to this imbecile ask people to send $1,000 to help Israel and all this. And I'm not being anti-Israeli, okay? I'm not bashing Israel. I'm not being anti-Semitic. I'm not one of these Jews or the bane of the world type of people. I'm just saying from a strictly biblical standpoint, the idea that Israel is God's chosen people, God's covenant people, it could be I like to say it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but I have so many candidates like the evolutionists that it's really hard to determine. Okay, but anyway, the entire New Testament, the word testament is equivalent to covenant. If you look in Strong's Concordance, okay, you go to Matthew 26, and Jesus said, this is, he breaks this bread and wine and said, this is the wine of the New Testament. He's saying, I'm shedding my blood for a new covenant with you, and it's a covenant without the laws and without the Old Testament. So how do you it's so, if you follow what I'm saying, okay, the word testament is equivalent to covenant, and the New Testament means new covenant. So how can you say Israel is God's covenant people when that covenant was made all the way back in Genesis chapter 12 to Abraham, and they broke the covenant so many times? Just read the Old Testament, and finally Jesus has had it. Okay, in Matthew 23, he asked the Pharisees, how can you escape the damnation of hell? And he asked Jerusalem in general, how I've tried to gather you, but you would not be gathered. In John chapter 8, he basically accuses the Jews of being sons of the devil. I mean, what part of, I don't understand how people miss this, okay, these so-called experts. And that's important to our discussion, because Israel, again, has nothing to do with, there might be end times, okay, issues that happen, but if you're in the United States right now, okay, you'd best be concerned about this identification of Mystery Babylon, okay? There is a battle of Armageddon and Gog and Magog, but that's going to happen after the United States is long gone. So if you're in the United States and you're looking overseas at Israel, and you're one of these, following these imbeciles, you're one of these lemmings, all I can say is wake up. If you're listening to this right now, stop listening to these people, and don't listen to me. You look at me as a conduit or a way, a segue, and just go out and get your own Bible and read it for yourselves. Okay, read these chapters. I mean, read Matthew chapter 3, for instance, where John the Baptist, okay, the modern day Elijah, as predicted in Malachi 4, the last chapter in the Old Testament, he calls the Jewish Pharisees, he calls them a brood of vipers, okay, and asks them how they can avoid the coming wrath. Who warned you to flee from the coming wrath? Produce fruit in keeping with repentance. In other words, produce believers in Jesus Christ. Don't follow Israel. Don't be part of physical Israel. I mean, he's saying, John the Baptist, okay, who Jesus called the greatest person that ever lived in the Old Testament. Okay, if you go ahead and you read Matthew 11, is asking the Jews, the Jewish leaders, how can you escape the coming wrath? You brood of vipers, you den of vipers and thieves, the money changers. It's just so ridiculous. Okay, and I'm going on a tangent right now, but this all segues into the subject of tonight's show, and that is the identification of Mystery Babylon, which is no doubt the United States. Okay, so there's four. I broke it down into 4 parts. This introduction. Okay, and basically, it just goes into the concept that this nation was founded on Christian principles, and this idea that the church, the Christian church, is not a physical building. Okay, there's not going to be a physical temple that to be rebuilt in Jerusalem. Okay, with some comic book antichrist, standing in a temple, the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. First of all, it's going to take years to do. Okay, second of all, you cannot even, a Jew can barely get on the Temple Mount and over in Jerusalem, which is now the third holiest site in the so-called religion of peace, okay, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, or whatever they call it, without basically almost starting World War III. So how are the Arabs going to capitulate and let the Jews build a whole temple? It is so utterly ridiculous. It's such a, and I'm no geopolitical expert, okay, but how smart do you have to be? The Arabs who don't even want Jews to visit the Temple Mount, okay, are going to just all of a sudden just roll over and say, all right, not only can you come on here, but you can build your most holy site over our third most holy site. It doesn't make any sense. It's just nonsense, okay? So, but the point is that the church, and you can read about this, in places like, Ephesians chapter 2 and Colossians, okay? The church isn't a physical building, okay? Of course, look, I mean, people, you have, you go to church and you meet with other believers. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, but it's not a physical temple. It's not church is the body of Christ. And that's just that simple, okay? If you read, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, chapter 12, okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, your body is a temple of God, all right? As I said, Colossians, okay, chapter 3, okay, Christ is the head of the body, which is the church. That's the point, okay? So again, there's not going to be, so stop listening to these bozos, all right? These people that are trying to tell you that, well, before any of this happens, before we have our pre-tribulation rapture and our great tribulation, the third temple must be rebuilt, and the land of God's chosen people, because they're God's chosen people, and the Antichrist has to sit down in the temple. No, he doesn't. The temple of God is the human body. So, and we'll get into this in a little bit. So obviously the abomination of desolation, which some of you may be familiar with, spoken in, back there in Daniel chapter 9, it's an occupation of a human. It's a satanic occupation of a human. Something like Judas Iscariot, okay? Satan entered into Judas, okay? And that's when Judas covenanted. There's the word covenant, okay? If you go back to Zechariah, I think it's chapter 11, okay? My people made a covenant to sell me for 30 pieces of silver, which was Judas, infilled by the spirit of Satan, promising to hand Jesus over to the Jewish Pharisees, God's chosen people, for 30 pieces of silver, all right? So that is much more likely the abomination of desolation than some comic book antichrist showing up in some rebuilt Jerusalem temple that's never going to get rebuilt. Okay? So the point I try to make here in the introduction is that not only people say United States, where's the United States in biblical prophecy, Mystery Babylon, the Whore of Babylon is the Catholic Church, and Armageddon is Israel, and all this other nonsense. I'm saying the exact opposite. Not only should the United States be in biblical prophecy, the United States should be the focal point of biblical prophecy. Okay? And again, based on things in reality, like what I just read about Planned Parenthood selling a live baby's brains for $160. Okay? A nation that calls itself Christian and under God, okay, who relies on rights, inalienable rights given by its creator, put the Declaration of Independence and firm reliance on divine providence. At the conclusion of the Declaration of Independence has gone from that to this image of the beast in the White House, okay, who I believe is the abomination of desolation, and not just because of his name, Obama, saying, God bless Planned Parenthood. God bless the organization that rips a baby's face off and sells its brains. He's calling for God's blessing. Now that's how far we've fallen. So if again, just if you think a presidential debate, if you think a President Trump is gonna salvage this nation in God's eyes, that's the Old Testament that you really need to go back and read. Read about the kings of Israel, okay, Manasseh, Ahab, these sorts of people, okay. As far as Trump trying to redeem this nation, this Federal Reserve Corporation, formerly known as America, okay. And then I go into some background. Okay, now there's the ancient Babylon. Okay, now Samaria and world history, and this is basic world history. Now the region of Samaria is generally recognized as that area as the first organized civilization, and just kind of showed up out of nowhere. Even history books will say, well, we had evolution, and then all of a sudden, boom, from half-ape Neanderthals, all of a sudden we have this organized civilization known as the Sumerians. Okay, so the evolutionists, that's a whole other all a just pile of nonsense. But anyway, the original Babylon, from where we get the Tower of Babel, and the Babel or confusion, God confused the languages, was in this region of Samaria. Okay, now Babylon is in modern, of course, the modern-day Babylon is in Iraq. And by the way, many so-called biblical scholars were saying, oh, this is, now Babylon's going to be rebuilt, and, Saddam Hussein is gone. Now we're, when Babylon gets rebuilt, and that's the mystery Babylon of Revelation. And so stupid, all right? So, of course, a lot of books were sold, and a lot of money was made on that whole era. But anyway, I go through and, just a basic explanation of the biblical Cain. Now, Cain and Abel, okay, of course, were the first two children of Adam and Eve. Now, what's interesting, just as an aside, okay, what I found in my research, and I really didn't post this on my website anywhere, but as I researched, Cain, okay, and this might sound a little sick, but if you read the book of Genesis, now Cain basically was the father of many of the gods of mythology, okay? If you go back, and there's a lot of parallels, okay, and maybe it's the wrong time to get into that, off on this tangent right now, but if you go back and you read mythology, okay, for example, Nimrod, which was the first king of Babylon, the original Babylon, okay, it was equate to the Babylonian Tammuz. If you read in Jeremiah chapter 7, women weeping for Tammuz, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the Nimrod, which is the original king of Babylon. But there are a lot of parallels, okay, between, say, Osiris and this Nimrod. When I say Apollo is equated to Osiris, and I've said that, the Nimrod. Now Nimrod, now Osiris, now his sister and his wife, and in some cases, some mythologies, his mother, Osiris, sister, wife, mother, that's pretty disgusting. But if you read the account of the biblical Cain, okay, a careful reading, I believe that Cain basically copulated, okay, with his own mother, that being Eve, okay, because if you read, and the reason I'm saying this is because out of the line of Cain and Eve came a lot of equivalence of some of the gods and the godlike figures of mythology, and then you get into Genesis chapter 6. Now I'm getting into Tom Horn and Steve Quayle territory. I don't necessarily want to go there, but the point is that there's a lot of parallels between the quote mythologies of the world and early biblical world history. Okay, and this is really the foundation of Mystery Babylon. Okay, because of course when you hear the word Babylon, the Mystery Babylon in the Bible, okay, not in world history, not secular world history. Okay, you're never going to hear this. You listen to secular world history, and and half-ape Neanderthals built the Great Pyramid of Giza, and if you believe that line of crap in Nat Geo, then you're wasting your time listening, and more power to you. But if you're still here listening, I'm just trying to build the framework for Mystery Babylon, okay, being the United States and all the occult symbolism. So the concept of the male and the female, the original male, the original female, of course, is Adam and Eve, and then Cain and Abel. Now Cain killed Abel, and my brother's keeper. Cain was jealous of Abel and killed him. Okay, now there were only 3 humans on earth from the biblical standpoint, and Cain came into his wife, so who else is there but Eve, his mother? And what I'm saying is that aligns with a lot of mythologies, okay, where Osiris married his sister slash wife slash mother, okay? And again, that equates to Nimrod of the original Babylon of Genesis chapter 11, okay? So it's very important to keep in mind, okay, because remember, this male-female combination that exists through every mythology in the world, okay, and I focus on ancient Egypt and sometimes Babylon and Rome and Greece, but Egypt because it's the most glaring example, not only the Old Testament, but just to make this point again of the male-female combination. Remember we talked about this on recent shows, the concept of the Rosicrucians or the Rosy Cross, all right, and we there's a whole link on the covering page, the opening page of my website, the Mystery Babylon USA ebook, And I make the case that this rose-cross combination is encapsulated in the half-white image of the beast in the White House. Okay, the Columbia, which is the female, and the Occident, which is the male. The Occident, which equates to the Egyptian god Osiris, okay, and the Columbia, which equates to the female goddess or Isis, okay, or the Great Mother, or the whore of Babylon, or Gaia. We know it today as Mother Earth. Okay, nature worship is huge. That's at the core of the New Age movement, which is really satanic in nature. Okay, well, Pan. Remember I mentioned Pan before, or the horn god. No, then he's known as a nature god. Okay, so that's very interesting. So I'm trying to just wrap my hands around this whole thing in a 1-hour program, but hopefully the points I'm making are hitting home. Okay, so maybe one of the takeoffs from right now is that this quote conspiracy permeates every aspect of world history, from the Garden of Eden right through today. Okay, it's always been here. It's here right now, and it's pervading our society. I mean, we sit here and we watch, these football games and this nonsense called the presidential election, and take this stuff seriously. But hopefully, I'm painting the picture here that it's just complete nonsense. And the only way to get your arms around this quote conspiracy is the Bible itself. Okay, all the geopolitical experts in the world and all the physicists and all the scientists in the world can get together and write their nonsense, but nothing encapsulates this whole thing. And I'm doing my best to make these connections. But anyway, just enough of that tangent. So the point I guess I'm trying to make is that the original male-female combination, the original rose cross, the original Rosicrucian, was Cain and his mother Eve, which is again reflected in just about every mythology throughout the ancient world. But let's just stick with, for the most part, the ancient Egyptians, again, because you have this Isis-Osiris combination, and this is again reflected into ancient Babylon. Now, in ancient Babylon, you had the Earth Mother, or Gaia, okay, known as Ishtar. Okay, in Babylon, Isis was known as Ishtar. Now, cradling her son, which would be the biblical Cain, the equivalent of the biblical Cain, which is, of course, equivalent to Satan. If you go back to John chapter 8, for example, your father, the devil, he was a murderer from the beginning. So basically, Jesus himself is calling Cain Satan. Okay, so he's the indwelled Satan. I'm not saying Cain was running around with 2 horns in his head. I'm saying he was indwelled in a spiritual sense, in the way that Judas was indwelled by Satan, in a sense that the abomination of desolation, this image of the beast in the White House, is indwelled by Satan. Okay, I'm not saying Satan, Obama goes they'll Lincoln bedroom every night, and the horns come out and he takes off his pants and the tail unfolds and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that. Okay, I'm saying in a biblical sense is that Satan indwells people, and this is by people's choice, by the way, just like Queen Jezebel, Hillary Clinton. Okay, and this is by the way, this is explained. I hope I'm doing a good job explaining, but this is really the purpose of this book, Pleased to Meet You. Okay, really tries to kind of explain this in a different way. So it would help if you read that book. Okay, again, it's available on boxofsunglasses.com to kind of explain this in a more palatable manner. But anyway, so where do we see this reunion, this satanic union of male and female, of Osiris, okay, and Isis, okay, Tammuz and Ishtar of ancient Babylon, okay, the original Babylon, Genesis 11. Where do we see it but in the United States? Okay, this concept, remember the ancient Egyptians believed that the Pharaoh, this is history, and this isn't the Bible, and this is basic history, so-called secular history as well. The Egyptian Pharaoh was considered the son of the gods. Okay, the son of Osiris, the dead Osiris, and the whore goddess Isis, or Ishtar. Okay, and what is Osiris? What is his phallus? What does it symbolize? But the obelisks throughout the world. Okay, so the obelisk in St. Peter's Square. So when the the satanic pope, whoever it is in the Catholic Church, the so-called Christian Church, the Catholic Church, when he gets up in St. Peter's Square and he's looking straight, he's looking at the phallus of Osiris, okay, which is one reason why people consider the Roman Catholic Church the whore of Babylon. It's not a bad guess, but it's not correct. But anyway, this is symbolically what's going on. So you know, in Ezekiel chapter 23, and the Jews are in the middle of all this, by the way. Okay, the Jews and the Kabbalah is the backbone of Freemasonry and the Rosicrucians and this whole kind of tree of knowledge of good and evil. And we went through this on previous shows too. We discussed the Sephiroth tree, okay, which the New Agers and the occultists and the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons and all these other people call the tree of life. It's a serpent climbing a tree with 10 numbers on it, okay. And we made the connections that this connects to Matthew chapters 15 and 16. Remember, the Pharisees approached Jesus, and Jesus says, you're a bunch of astrologers. You can discern the signs of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the time, and no sign will be given to you but the sign of the prophet Jonah, and that whole thing. And then, then a little bit later, he goes on, beware the leaven of the Pharisees. And the apostles start arguing, of course, we bought no bread. And Jesus said, you stupid, no dummies. I'm talking about physical bread. I'm talking about the doctrine of the Pharisees. Okay? So, in other words, this whole concept of astrology and astronomy, which is really the basis of a lot of Egyptian and Greek and Roman and everybody's mythology, really, is nothing but a study, as a work in Satanism. Okay? So the Jews are right in the middle of this whole mess, okay? And they got themselves, okay, when they were sharing their knowledge of the God's religion with the Canaanites and the other people surrounding them, okay? And this is why God was so upset with his chosen people. They were his chosen people in the Old Testament. He kept calling them, figuratively speaking, a bunch of whores, okay? The whole book of Hosea, the whole point of the book of Hosea, Gomer was his wife, and she was, he told Hosea to go marry this whore called Gomer, and that's symbolic of, Israel, the whore, going out and whoring herself, just like Eve whored herself with her own son, Cain, and birthed the whole line of characters that, frankly, equate to many of the characters of Greek and Roman mythology. Okay. So if you read, for example, you go and you read Ezekiel chapter 23, and God, compares Israel, the separate nations of Israel, Judah and Israel, as a whore. Okay. And the language in there is borderline pornographic. Okay. But when he talks about, basically, Israel's being so bad, acting like a whore that was getting, let's say, inseminated by a horse. Okay, that's how bad things got in a spiritual sense. This is really the lowest of the low. Okay, but it's a spiritual fornication, and it's reflected in this male-female union. Okay, that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Okay, and Eve and Cain. All right. So I'll say it one more time, and this gave rise to Tammuz, okay, which is Nimrod of Genesis 11, and his mother/wife/sister, Ishtar. Okay, so we have Nimrod's equivalent to the Egyptian Osiris, and Ishtar is equivalent to the whore of Babylon, or Gaia, or the Egyptian goddess Isis. And again, this is the rose is symbolic of Osiris, and the cross, the four kingdoms of nature, is symbolic of Isis. Okay, so we get out of the combination of those two, we get the sun, which is symbolized by the Egyptian Pharaoh. So now you could see this whole point of, Pharaoh, and, the firstborn, the first male child of Pharaoh is considered the next Pharaoh. So when God kills Pharaoh's firstborn and the firstborn in all of Egypt in the 10th plague, now it starts to make a whole lot more sense. Okay, this is now we're getting to the core of things. This is really what he's getting at. Okay, so along comes the United States, founded by on Christian principles, albeit not perfect. And I'm not one of these people, I know there's people out there saying, just as an aside, the United States, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin were Satanists, and, all this, and Washington, D.C. was, built, and, the United States was part of the Masonic conspiracy. It's a load of crap, okay? I know there's a few of the founders, the jury's still out on them. Alexander Hamilton, okay, Jefferson, Ben Franklin, all right. But the organic foundation, the lifestyle, the livelihood, the lesser-known founders in the nation as a whole was a Christian nation. Christian principles, okay, and calling out holy days and state constitutions, demanding that people be, believe in Jesus Christ and the Christian religion, okay, and the founding Princeton, Harvard, Yale, okay, all were founded, for a belief in Jesus Christ and all this. So the nation was a Christian nation, okay? And besides that, just as another aside, okay, this kind of helps buttress the case for Mystery Babylon USA, it makes no sense that the founders who gave us the Constitution are part of the quote conspiracy, because the real conspirators, okay, the J.P. Morgans, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all these other people would not have spent the last 100 years with their tax-exempt foundations and their Columbia Teachers College and their University of Chicago and their Harvard, would not have spent so much time and effort funding all the useful idiots in the colleges. That's kind of filtered down into things like Black Lives Matter and the whole Soros, the MoveOn.org, and all these useful idiots. They wouldn't have spent so much time funding and founding all these groups and dumbing down the education system and bashing the Constitution if the founders are part of the conspiracy. That's how ridiculous that whole... Think about how ridiculous that is. So they were part of the conspiracy, but at the same time, the quote, the Satan-worshipping Rothschild Rockefeller complex has spent the last 100 years bashing it into the ground. So it makes no sense to sit here and say, oh, the United States, the founders were, they were Masons, and some of them were on a very social level, okay? And I'm not saying every Masonic lodge in every town is full of a bunch of Satanists, okay? A lot of those people are just the regular, everyday people joining the organization. Maybe they need an excuse to get out of the house or whatever, and they're not seriously into it, okay? So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying once you get to the highest levels of Freemasonry and the symbolism of Freemasonry, again, this is it, okay? This is the symbolism of Freemasonry. You can't deny that, okay? You can't deny the male and female columns of Joachim and Boaz, okay, which we've discussed in previous episodes of this show, and say that, Freemasonry isn't satanic in nature, okay? Now, again, the low-level members, whether they understand that or not, I don't know. I'm saying most of them do not, and I'm not accusing them of being Satanists again, but they really should go and research their own organization and its history and its symbolism. But anyway, so when you mash all this together, okay, there can be no doubt that the United States sits at the core of the co-conspiracy and is Mystery Babylon of today, okay? And now I'm just going to read through Isaiah chapter 47. Here's a good one to kind of make the point. Remember, I was talking about Isis / Eve / Ishtar, okay, who equates, by the way, to Athena or Libertas or Liberty, okay, Lady Liberty is based on Libertas, the Roman female goddess Libertas, which equates to the Roman Diana or Mother Earth, or the Greek Artemis, or the Egyptian Isis, Babylonian Ishtar, etc., etc., her biblical Eve. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground, there is no throne. O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal, uncover thy locks, make bare the leg, uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers. Thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, shall thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man. As for a Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. Not national, not physical Israel. Okay, read Romans chapter 9, parentheses, to what Israel really is. Okay, I don't want to go off on that tangent right now. O daughter of the Chaldeans, okay, Chaldeans, Babylonians, okay, Tammuz and Ishtar. For thou shalt not be more called the Lady of Kingdoms. Okay, so that is your whore of Babylon right there in a nutshell in Isaiah chapter 47. So, let's see, I'm already going on to the full hour, and I haven't even gotten to Revelation. I'm just still building the foundation here. Isaiah 13 is another chapter, another well-known chapter by biblical scholars. Okay, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. Lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt a voice unto them, shake the hand, that they may go into the gates of the noble. I have commanded my sanctified ones. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come down as a destruction from the Almighty. Okay, so the day of the Lord is obviously talking about a future event. Okay, there's nothing of the, I'll just summarize it here for you in the respect of time, but there was no day of the Lord or vengeance of the Lord that happened in the Old Testament. Okay, there was not to the level that arises in Revelation 17 and 18. So obviously some future point is being discussed here. And again, this is verse 10 in Isaiah 13. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give off their light, and the sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. Now, that's interesting, the moon and her. Now, of course, another symbolism. The moon is generally regarded as the Boaz column, or the Jackim column. In Freemasonry, you have the two columns. Okay, you have the male and the female. Okay, the lunar or the female or the goddess, and then the male, the sun god. Again, Osiris, the rose, the sun, the female, the moon, the lunar goddess. Okay, Luna. So when he says, will not cause her light to shine, just as an aside, that's he's assigning, Isaiah is assigning a female characteristic to the moon. And that's what he's getting at, which means the sun god, or the male, or Apollo, Osiris, Nimrod, Tammuz, etc. Okay, the male, female, and of course, again, the Pharaoh Barry, standing between the columns of Jackim and Boaz. Just Google, Barry Obama, 2008, Democratic National Convention, and what pops up is the picture of the abomination of desolation of Obama standing between the columns, the moon and the sun column of Freemasonry, basically relegating to himself godlike powers, that he is the new pharaoh of this modern day Egypt or mystery Babylon known as the United States. So it goes on a little more in Isaiah 13, and I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a man more precious than gold. And in the wrath of the Lord of hosts and the day of his fierce anger. Now, there's a lot of language in there that it refers to true believers. I don't necessarily want to go off on a tangent right now. I'm just trying to make the point that God is talking about a day of vengeance, okay, and this is encapsulated, okay, and its climaxes in Revelation 17 and Revelation 18, and obviously some entity is coming into focus there, okay. And again, what I'm saying is it's not Saudi Arabia, it's not the Roman Catholic Church. Who else have I read? It's not the physical Babylon and Iraq. Okay, Iraq's still a mess. The whole weapons of mass destruction line by the Skull and Bones descendant of the Nazi-supporting Bush family, got us into that whole scam. But so what's left? And behold, here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen, and he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. And now the graven images of her gods, now what might those be? Might it be the Statue of Liberty, or Libertas, which of course, we're told is, welcoming pilgrims to the United States, which was built by a Freemason, a French Freemason. I can't remember his name right now, but it's in honor of the god Libertas, or the Egyptian goddess Isis, right there in New York Harbor. And of course, New York City is home to this place, the United Nations, and this place, okay, which is St. John's the Divine Cathedral, and is also the headquarters of the world's financial capital and the New York Federal Reserve. The most powerful and influential branch of the Federal Reserve System is found in New York City. So, is there a better candidate for New York, for Mystery Babylon, than New York City, the United States as a whole? I think not. And I go through this whole concept again. This is the candidates page, talking about everything. Just to kind of summarize the different candidates that I've read. Okay, and this is called, this is part 3 candidates, and I go into New York City, USA, as the de facto headquarters of Mystery Babylon. There's just no doubt. Okay, another thing I forgot to mention is the Lucis Trust, or Lucifer's Publishing Company, which is a non-governmental organization, so-called non-governmental organization. That's a joke, but anyway, Lucifer's Publishing Company, which we call Lucis Trust, okay, which was founded by a woman named Alice Bailey, okay, another New Age wacko, okay, another stalwart of the New Age movement, but anyway, who wrote, and I read about her extensively in section 3 of this book, again, which is again available for PDF download on boxofsunglasses.com. But anyway, Alice Bailey, who supposedly wrote under the influence of a spirit or a medium known as DK, or Master DK, or an Ascended Master. And that's very interesting. If you go back to Matthew chapter 23, he says, call no one on earth Father or Master. You have one Master, even Christ. So that takes on a whole new level of meaning when you read about, and you read through people like Alice Bailey. And Helen Blavatsky, by the way, was another one who wrote under the supposed influence, channeled a influence of a spirit god, or what she called an Ascended Master. Okay, you can laugh this stuff off, and it's a joke, and it's all funny. It's all fun and games, but I have a couple things to say to that. Number one is the joke's on you. Number one, because you're paying for all this crap with your tax dollars, okay, with your Federal Reserve notes, because the United States is, in fact, let's just face it, the United States, without the United States, there would be a United Nations, okay? We support whatever, 2/3 of the budget or whatever. We float this place, we give it at home, and right there in New York City, Rockefeller donated, Rockefeller founded the United Nations, so there's that Rockefeller name again. And the second thing is a lot of very powerful people, including David Rockefeller, environmental wacko extraordinaire, the Canadian Maurice Strong, who's basically the Canadian Al Gore, sits at the core of the modern-day environmental movement, which is guided by the anti-10 commandments of the Georgia Guidestones, founded by Robert Christian, the Rose Cross, Rose plus the Cross, and I'll rehash that old territory. But anyway, getting back to Lucis Trust, okay, David Rockefeller, Robert Mueller, okay, now Robert Mueller, you may not know who he is, but he's responsible for this whole this federal government educational scam known as Common Core, okay, was a member and influenced by Alice Bailey's Lucifer's Publishing Company. So think about that. So if you think this is all a joke and this is all funny, ha-ha, and this is, I'm going to go listen to Fox News and, see who won the debate last night, that's fine if you believe in all that crap. But this is happening. What I'm saying is this stuff is happening. It is underway right now, okay? So when's the last time you heard on Fox News? I mean, what's Obama doing? What is he slithering around? What is this serpent this image of the beast. What is he doing? What is the National Defense Authorization Act? For example, what is all this? What is Lucifer's publishing company? What is that? Okay, what is Common Core? Who's Robert Mueller? Okay, what's he doing? What did he study? What was he doing at Lucifer's publishing company? Who the hell put this guy in charge of the education system of this nation? Okay, so you can sit there and say this is all fun and games, but if you go and you read, let me just jump over to 1 Timothy chapter 4, and I'll read it right out of the 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Okay, and that's another verse that's pervasive in the end times, biblical, scholars kind of people look at that verse. But think about what I'm saying here. The entire education system of this country right now is based on the work of a guy who attended and was a member of something called Lucifer's Publishing Company, okay, which in turn was founded by a woman whose most of life's work, by her own admission, came under the influence of a spirit guide. Okay. So, seducing spirits, doctrines of devils, I mean, it's what I'm saying, it's all around us. Okay, the lies, everything, it surrounds us, okay, from evolution to the environmental movement to this debt-based scam, okay, these scam artists telling us that we have to go into debt to this thing. Okay, the modern-day money changers of the Federal Reserve and their temple of Baal. Okay, the name for the Egyptian pyramid. Okay, Baal is equivalent to Osiris or Nimrod or Tammuz. Okay, so you can see when I say that, quote, conspiracy is everywhere, the only way to wrap your hands around it is the Bible itself. Now, hopefully, this stuff is starting to sink in, and that's basically that's more or less the background. And I guess we can kind of end it here, and then next time we'll pick up on the actual verses of Revelation 17, and then we'll go into Revelation 18 line by line and go back into Revelation accordingly as needed to identify some of the entities and the beast and the whore, and the beast shall hate the whore. But just for now, suffice it to say that if you go ahead and read the breakdown of my breakdown of Revelation 17 and 18, it reads exactly like today's headline. So in other words, the whore will sit on the beast, which implies the whore controls the beast, but the beast in actuality, which are 10 kings, the 10 horns are 10 kings, which will share their power 1 hour with the beast, and the beast represents the kings of the world, okay, or the major governments of the world. So in other words, the world hates the whore, which is the United States. If you take the United States as the modern day Israel, a whore of, say, Ezekiel chapter 23, and then sitting on the beast, which means she's kind of controlling the whore, but then the beast actually hates the whore. You're seeing this in current events, okay? China, Russia, all the countries around the world are really starting to hate the United States for its scam Federal Reserve System, for selling them a bunch of fiat paper money, which is worth crap, okay, literally. They're finding it out, China especially. It's warmongering, it's hypocrisy, okay? Distributing porn, okay? I've just read something, like 70% of the porn in the world comes out of the United States. We're a cesspool. We used to export steel and products that the world, food that the world could use. Now we export porn, fake Federal Reserve notes, inflation, and wars. And the world's getting tired of it and the hypocrisy. So the world is starting to turn on the whore, okay? And remember, Isaiah chapter 13, we read a little few snippets out of Isaiah 13, and those, the day of vengeance, burning, melting her with fire, is going to be reflected in Revelation 17, and it does not bode well for the United States, okay? And I'll just leave it at that. And again, I'll conclude on the opening page of the site. Perhaps the most important thing is God's simple salvation plan. And it is simple, okay? You don't need to go to the Catholic Church. You don't need to go to some priest, okay? Under the authority of the Pope, who worships in front of the obelisk or the phallus of Osiris, as I mentioned before. You don't need to go to confession. You don't need to get baptized. You don't need to do anything, okay, except confess and pray to Jesus for redemption and forgiveness, okay? It's a free gift, and it's quite simple. And that's the most important thing to take off out of all this, okay? Well, at the end of the day, all this stuff is nonsense, in a sense, okay? And I'm talking on a relative scale. Of course, it's not from our perspective looking out, but from God's perspective looking in. Okay, Isaiah chapter 40, all the nations are as grass. Okay, Isaiah chapter 2, what account is man? He's a breath. Or, James chapter 4, mankind, life is a vapor trail, this life. But anyway, God's simple salvation plan, because a lot of this stuff is admittedly gets pretty heavy, and I can't say I'm happy to be here. There's places I'd rather be than talking about this stuff, but I have my own reasons for being here. But I'm compelled to put this out there, and hopefully a lot of people are listening and taking note. But again, boxofsunglasses.com. Good night and God bless.